There once lived a man and a woman, kind-hearted and hard-working, who had always wished for a child, but could not have one. The couple resided in a small cottage on the edge of a forest. Their little house had a small window at the back, which overlooked a splendid garden. The garden, bathed in sunlight, bloomed with a vibrant array of flowers and herbs, filling the air with sweet fragrances. This garden was enclosed by a high, imposing wall, covered with thick vines and climbing ivy. No one dared to venture into it, for the garden belonged to a witch, a woman of great power, who was feared by all the villagers. One crisp autumn afternoon, the woman stood by the window, gazing longingly at the garden below. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, but what caught her eye was a small bed of Rapunzel, a rare herb with lush, green leaves and roots like radishes. Her desire grew stronger with each passing day. She could not understand why, but the more she looked at the Rapunzel, the more she craved it. It became an obsession, and as her yearning deepened, so did her sorrow. Her cheeks grew pale, and a faint sadness clouded her once bright eyes. She could not shake the desire, and it began to consume her thoughts. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun filtered through the window, the man noticed his wife's melancholy. He sat beside her, his brow furrowed with concern. "What is wrong, my dear?" he asked gently, his voice filled with worry. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with helplessness. "Ah," she sighed, "if I cannot eat some of the Rapunzel from the garden behind our house, I think I shall die. I have never craved anything more in my life. I can no longer bear it." The man, deeply in love with her and eager to see her well, thought long and hard. He knew of the witch's fearsome reputation, but love had clouded his judgment. "Sooner than let my lovely wife die," he whispered to himself, "I will bring her some of the Rapunzel myself, no matter what the cost. I will do anything to save her." That very night, when the sky had darkened and the village was quiet, the man decided to venture out. He pulled his cloak around him and set off toward the witch's garden. His heart pounded with fear, but his love for his wife gave him courage. As he approached the high wall that encircled the garden, the moonlight illuminated the vines and flowers that crept up the stone. He hesitated for only a moment before scrambling up the wall with all his might. With a quiet thud, he landed softly inside the garden. He hurried to the bed of Rapunzel and began to gather the tender leaves, careful not to disturb the rest of the garden. The herbs seemed to almost glow under the moon's light, as if it were meant for him to take. With his arms full of the precious Rapunzel, he climbed back over the wall and hurried home. His wife, pale and weak from longing, was overjoyed when he presented the herbs to her. She immediately set to work making a salad with the Rapunzel, savoring every bite. As she ate, color returned to her cheeks, and a satisfied smile spread across her face. But the next morning, when the woman awoke, the desire for the Rapunzel had returned, stronger than ever. It was as though the herb had worked its magic on her, and now she felt an even greater hunger for it. She could think of nothing else. Her thoughts were filled with images of the lush garden, and she longed to taste the Rapunzel again. "Please, my love," she said to her husband, her voice tinged with desperation. "I need more. I cannot live without it." The man looked at his wife, torn. He knew the danger, but he could not bear to see her so unhappy. "I will fetch more," he promised. "Wait here, and I will return with what you need." Once more, he ventured into the night, scaling the wall and making his way into the witch's garden. He froze in terror as he saw a shadow move across the garden. His blood ran cold. It was the witch. Before he could react, the witch appeared before him, her eyes burning with fury. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice like a venomous snake. "Sneak into my garden and steal my Rapunzel like a thief. You shall pay for this transgression." The man trembled, his knees weak with fear. "Please, have mercy," he begged. "My wife has seen the Rapunzel from our window, and she has longed for it so much that she would have died without it. I could not bear to see her suffer." The witch studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, her anger seemed to soften, and she spoke, her voice cold but measured. "If this is true, I will allow you to take as much as you desire, but in exchange, you must promise me one thing. When your wife gives birth to a child, you must give that child to me. I will raise it as my own, and it will be cared for." The man, desperate and afraid, agreed without thinking. "Yes, I promise. Take whatever you want, just let my wife live." And so, when the baby girl was born, the witch appeared immediately. She named the child Rapunzel and took her away, leaving the parents heartbroken and alone. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child beneath the sun. Her golden hair shimmered like sunlight. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her spirit was full of wonder. As the years passed, she blossomed into a young woman of rare beauty, with a kindness and innocence that made her loved by all who met her. The days stretched long and endless, and Rapunzel would often gaze longingly out the tiny window, wondering what the world beyond the tower looked like. When Rapunzel turned 12, the witch's cruelty reached new heights. The tower, once a place of solitude and safety, became a prison. The witch had no intention of allowing Rapunzel to experience the world beyond her grasp. She shut her away in a tower deep within the forest, where no one could find her. The tower was tall, with smooth, unscalable walls, and no stairs or doors. Only a small window, high above, allowed Rapunzel to see the sky. Each day, Rapunzel's world was confined to the narrow space of the tower. In the quiet of her loneliness, Rapunzel often sang to herself. Her voice, clear and sweet, drifted through the trees, a song of longing for the world she could never know. But the witch, with her sharp eyes and magic, always kept her close. Whenever she needed to visit Rapunzel, she would stand beneath the little window, her voice dripping with authority and power, and cry out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel, always obedient, would wind her magnificent hair, long and fine as spun gold, around the hook in the window. With practiced ease, she would lower the long tresses down the side of the tower. The witch, with her crooked fingers, would climb up, using Rapunzel's hair as a ladder, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Days turned into months, and months into years. Rapunzel grew more beautiful with each passing day, but she remained trapped in her tower, her only solace the song she sang and the wind that whispered through the trees. But then, one fateful day, something changed. It was a crisp spring morning, when a prince, out on a hunt, happened to pass through the forest. He was a young man, strong and kind, with a heart full of adventure. His horse trotted through the forest, the sun filtering through the trees above him, when a sweet melody reached his ears. The song was so beautiful, so haunting, that it stopped him in his tracks. The voice was pure and filled with emotion, a voice that seemed to call out to him from deep within the woods. Intrigued and moved by the music, the prince dismounted from his horse and followed the sound, walking quietly through the trees. As he neared the tower, he stood in awe. The song echoed from the high window, and he could see the outline of a young woman inside, her golden hair shining in the sunlight. "Who is she?" the prince whispered to himself, his heart stirred with something he had never felt before, a deep connection to this mysterious voice. But when he looked for a way into the tower, he found none. The stone walls were high and smooth, without even the smallest crack or opening. He searched for a while, pacing around the base of the tower, but there was no way to reach her. Reluctantly, he returned to his palace, but the song had touched his soul so deeply that he could not forget it. Every day, he returned to the forest, standing behind the trees, listening for that sweet melody. He could not tear himself away. It was as if the music had enchanted him. One day, as he stood quietly behind a large oak tree, he heard the familiar sound of footsteps. The witch had arrived, her cackling voice breaking the stillness, as she stood beneath the window and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The prince's heart raced as he watched the young woman with the golden hair lower her beautiful tresses from the window. The witch climbed up, using the long silken hair as a ladder, disappearing into the tower. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first star began to twinkle in the sky, the prince returned to the tower. The prince's mind raced. "If that is the ladder that she climbs," he thought, "then I should try my fortune." He stood beneath the window and called out, just as the witch had done, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." In an instant, Rapunzel's golden hair fell from the window like a cascade of sunlight. The prince, his hands trembling with excitement, grasped the braid and began to climb, each step bringing him closer to the mysterious woman whose song had captivated his soul. As he climbed, he could hear Rapunzel's soft breathing, a whisper in the wind, until he reached the top. When he finally stepped over the edge of the tower, he found himself face to face with the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Rapunzel looked at him in surprise, her heart racing. She had never seen anyone other than the witch. Yet there was something in the prince's eyes, something kind and genuine, that made her feel a sense of safety. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Who are you?" she asked softly. "I am a prince," he replied, his voice gentle, "and I have come to find you. I have heard your song and could not stay away. My heart led me here." Rapunzel's heart flooded in her chest. Could this be real? Could someone else exist beyond the tower walls? Could someone love her, a girl trapped in a lonely world? The prince smiled warmly at her, and in that moment, they both knew that something beautiful had begun. Rapunzel stood in awe, her golden hair cascading around her like a glowing halo. She had never seen anyone like him before. The prince's eyes were full of kindness and wonder, and his smile made her heart beat faster. "Why have you come?" she asked, her voice trembling, unsure if this was a dream. "What do you seek here in this tower?" The prince looked at her with earnestness, his eyes never leaving hers. "I have heard your song, and it has touched my heart like nothing else. I could not stay away. I knew I had to come and meet the one who sings so beautifully, for your music calls to my soul. But I see now that I have found more than just a beautiful voice. I have found someone whose spirit shines brighter than the stars themselves." Rapunzel blushed, her cheeks turning a soft pink. "I do not belong here," Rapunzel whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow. "I have been trapped in this tower for as long as I can remember. The witch, she keeps me locked away from the world, from everything. I have no hope of escaping." The prince's heart ached at her words. "You do not have to remain here forever," he said softly. "I promise you, I will find a way to bring you out of this tower. You deserve to see the world, to live freely, to be loved and cherished as you should be. I will not leave you here, Rapunzel." Rapunzel's eyes filled with tears, a mix of disbelief and hope. "But how can you help me? The witch's magic is powerful. She will never let me go." The prince placed a hand over his heart, determined. "We will find a way, together. There is always a way when love is the guide. I will not rest until you are free." She had never dared to hope that someone could care for her so deeply, that someone would fight for her freedom. The idea seemed like a dream, too wonderful to be true. "I will trust you," Rapunzel said quietly, her voice filled with both fear and hope. "But how will we escape? The witch is always watching. She never leaves me alone for long." The prince smiled warmly, his confidence unwavering. "We will have to be clever. We will wait for the right moment when the witch is distracted, and then we will make our move. But first, I must come back tomorrow. I will bring you something that might help us, a way to communicate, and perhaps even to outwit her." With that, the prince climbed down the long braid of Rapunzel's golden hair, leaving her standing at the window, her heart full of emotions she had never known. The following day, as the sun dipped low in the sky, the prince returned to the tower, as promised. This time he had a plan. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel," he called, his voice filled with urgency. "Let down your hair." The long golden braid tumbled down, and the prince climbed up once more. But this time, he was not alone. He had brought with him a small pouch filled with dried herbs and an enchanted mirror. The herbs were said to have magical properties that could help deceive the witch, and the mirror was a gift from a wise sorcerer, capable of showing glimpses of hidden truths. "I've brought you something that might help," the prince said, placing the mirror in Rapunzel's hands. "This mirror will reveal what the witch is doing when we are apart. It will help us find her weaknesses." Rapunzel's eyes widened. "How can this work?" The prince smiled, his confidence growing. "The witch may have magic, but she is not invincible. No one is. We just need to be clever, patient, and brave." Together, they spent the evening planning their escape, speaking in whispers so as not to alert the witch. As the night grew darker, Rapunzel's heart filled with a new sense of hope. For the first time, she felt that there might be a way out, that freedom, love, and a new life could be possible. But as the prince prepared to leave, he turned to her, his eyes full of concern. "Be careful, Rapunzel," he said. "The witch will sense that something is different. We must be swift. Tomorrow when I come again, we will make our move." With a final glance, the prince climbed down the hair and disappeared into the night, leaving Rapunzel to wait, her heart beating wildly in her chest. She could barely believe that her dream of escape might actually come true. Would tomorrow be the day? As the moonlight poured through the window, Rapunzel looked out into the vast forest, her thoughts swirling with both fear and hope. She had spent so many years trapped in that tower, but now, for the first time, she could see a future beyond its walls, a future filled with love, freedom, and the prince who had captured her heart. The journey was just beginning. The next day, as the sun began to set low on the horizon, Rapunzel stood by the window, eagerly awaiting the prince's arrival. Her heart raced with excitement and anxiety. She could hardly believe that tomorrow might be the day she would finally escape from this dreadful tower that had imprisoned her for so long. But at the same time, she couldn't help but wonder, would they really escape? Would the witch find out? She knew that the witch's magic was powerful, and though she was hopeful, Rapunzel feared what would happen if they were caught. The prince arrived just as the sky turned shades of purple and gold. He called out to her softly, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The prince climbs up, and as they plan to descend together, they forget to check the mirror. At that very moment, the witch arrives. She calls up to Rapunzel, "Let down your hair." Rapunzel startles at the sound of the witch's voice, her hands trembling. The prince gently takes her hand and whispers, "Stay calm, act as if nothing has happened. I'll hide, and you let down your hair." Taking a deep breath, Rapunzel nods and releases her golden locks. As the witch climbs, she notices the unusual delay and frowns, sensing something is wrong. "Why did it take you so long to let down your hair today?" she asks, her voice dripping with malice. Rapunzel's heart races, but she remains calm. I was just thinking," she stammers, trying to hide her nervousness. "I've been waiting for you, as always." The witch studies her closely, her sharp gaze never leaving Rapunzel. Something feels different today." "What are you planning, Rapunzel?" she growls. "Do you think you can escape from me?" Rapunzel tries to act innocent, but the witch's suspicion only grows. She steps closer, eyes scanning every corner of the tower. The witch studies her, her eyes cold and calculating. "Don't lie to me, child. I know what you've been up to. No one escapes me. She can't quite place it, but a feeling of unease creeps over her. The prince, hiding in the shadows, waits for the right moment. Finally, he steps out, his voice strong and unwavering. "I won't leave you here, Rapunzel," he declares, stepping protectively in front of her. Then, turning to the witch, he adds, "She is coming with me. You have no right to keep her locked away like a prisoner." The witch's eyes narrow with fury as she realizes what is happening. Her lips curl into a wicked smile. "You fools!" she hisses. "You think you can escape me? I won't allow it." Raising her hands, she brandishes her wand and points it directly at Rapunzel. "I will curse you both," she shrieks, summoning a powerful spell. A crackling beam of dark magic shoots from her wand, aimed straight at Rapunzel. At the last second, the prince reacts. He grabs Rapunzel and pulls her aside. The magic streaks past her and strikes the mirror he had given her earlier. A blinding light flashes as the spell rebounds, hurtling back toward the witch. Her own dark magic slams into her chest, sending her staggering backward. She collapses to the ground, her strength draining away, her body weakened by the force of her own spell. Taking advantage of the moment, the prince grabs Rapunzel's long hair and quickly loops it over a sturdy tree branch that stretches close to the tower window. He tests its strength, then looks at Rapunzel. "Hold on tight," he tells her. With one last glance at the fallen witch, he helps Rapunzel climb out. She grips the hair like a rope, and together they slide down safely to the ground. Just as they land, the witch struggles to her feet, her fury burning brighter than ever. Seeing them escape, she lunges toward the window, preparing to climb down after them. But before she can, the prince swiftly draws his dagger and with a single sharp motion, cuts through Rapunzel's golden hair. The long braid falls away from the branch, leaving the witch stranded at the top of the tower. "No!" The witch screeches, her voice filled with rage and desperation. But it is too late. She is trapped. Hand in hand, Rapunzel and the prince run toward freedom, leaving the dark tower and the wicked witch behind forever. The prince and Rapunzel hurry to his horse, who had been grazing nearby, waiting faithfully. The prince helped Rapunzel onto the saddle before climbing up behind her. With a gentle nudge, the horse galloped away from the dark tower, carrying them toward freedom. After a long ride, they finally reached the prince's castle. As they entered the grand halls, the prince wasted no time in telling his parents, the king and queen, everything that had happened. They listened in astonishment, unable to believe the trials Rapunzel had endured. Moved by her story, the king and queen immediately welcomed Rapunzel as their own daughter. They admired her kindness, her bravery, and the strength she had shown despite all she had been through. Determined to reunite her with her true family, they sent messengers across the land to search for her parents. Before long, they were found, their hearts overflowing with joy to be reunited with their lost daughter. Together, they all lived in the palace, where Rapunzel was surrounded by love and happiness. In time, she and the prince were married in a grand celebration, and from that day forward, they ruled with wisdom and kindness, living happily ever after.